Who was this movie made for? The romance girlies? Probably more so the happy compromise watch for couples that are looking to go to a cinema for Valentine's Day. Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Today's video is a review of the new action comedy film Love Hurts, starring Ke Huy Quan, Ariana DeBose, and Daniel Wu. I ended up giving this film a 3.3 out of 5. It didn't quite live up to my hopes or expectations that I had for it. There are some moments though that I found to be of a higher quality than perhaps some other viewers are giving the film credit for. I would like to offer the film some grace for reasons I will get into, but overall I would definitely introduce the film with the talking point that it's very heavily leaning into the Valentine's Day spirit. It's giving a great deal of effort into trying to be festive for that holiday, so if you're wanting something to watch and your partner or date doesn't have a heart that is open to the more traditional roster of rom-coms or romantic dramas, this might be a decent alternative. My number one film of 2024 was absolutely a Valentine's Day film, as well as a Halloween film, but my regular viewers already knew that. I'll begin with a minimal spoiler section, and then as usual we will finish the video with a spoilers section so you can decide how far you would like to proceed in regards to that. Ke Huy Quan plays Marvin Gable, who also goes by the name Marv, a former hitman who worked for his brother, who goes by the name Knuckles, played by Daniel Wu. He has since gotten out of the crime world and become a successful realtor. However, his old life catches up with him, and it's threatening to destroy everything he's built for himself. The first main elephant in the room that I would like to address is the film's 83-minute runtime, 1 hour and 23 minutes. And I would like to know why this film is so short. Was there something removed during editing? Was there a last-minute incident of a corporate bigwig coming in and messing with something that resulted in a surprisingly short runtime of 1 hour and 23 minutes? Now, me personally, as a viewer, I would like to think that I'm open to films of varying runtimes. I really like House of Gucci and Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Both of those films run closer to 2 hours and 40 minutes. I've also been more proactive in watching older films this year as a pledge I made to myself to expand my Letterboxd log, and already I've watched a fair few older films that run rather short, whether it's 6-minute silent films from the earliest years of cinema, 20 to 30-minute long films from Charlie Chaplin's earlier filmography, or even these random crime films from the 1930s that run closer to 1 hour than 2. But the issue I have with Love Hurts having this runtime is that it's a story aiming to do quite a bit with its ensemble. There's multiple pairs or clusters of characters that have recurring storylines, be they comedic or dramatic or both, and these storylines are interconnected to varying degrees. And when you add everything together, it ends up feeling as though maybe one of the couplings or clusters should have been removed, not because they didn't give a valiant effort with their material, but because the end result is that for more or less most of these characters, it feels like you've done some good work, but there's also a lot more you could have done, and you should have developed and expanded certain details and relationships more than you did. I like some parts of the film, but there are also moments where it feels very much like either a first draft or a rough cut that could benefit from some polishing. Love Hurts was made by 87 North Productions, which is the production company jump-started by directors like Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, both of whom got their career beginnings working in stunts before transitioning to directing feature films. Chad Stahelski as a director is best known for the John Wick films, and David Leitch has directed various action films including Bullet Train and Atomic Blonde. Love Hurts is directed by Jonathan Eusebio, who, similar to Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, first began work in stunts, and then he did some second unit directing, and now this is his debut as a feature film director. Earlier this year, I watched a film called The Damned, and I didn't do a review of it because I don't do YouTube full-time, so it's simply not possible for me to review every new theatrical release that I watch. I am expanding my Patreon though, so that I can go through more films over there that I have watched for the first time in order to be able to share extra thoughts about the things I wasn't able to review on YouTube. But anyway, all that to say, when I watched The Damned, without having looked up the specifics on that film beforehand, I had the sense that I was watching a feature film directing debut. And after the film was over, and I opened up the IMDb page, I found that I was correct. When I know that I'm watching a feature film debut for a particular director, I do look at things slightly differently. I'm more so thinking about what are your strengths right now? Where do you have the potential to expand if you are able to get more opportunity? opportunities to further develop your skills, your craft, as well as your creative voice. And in that regard, I do feel that Jonathan Eusebio has potential. Him having a background in stunts is quite evident, as the film's action is by far the strongest aspect. You can tell that this is where he's most experienced and knowledgeable, but some of the ways that the story has been put together feels clumsy and disjointed. It begs the question of where the skill level is for things like constructing character arcs, directing actors, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not handling this film with kid gloves or aiming to paint its shortcomings in a more sympathetic light, just because I like that we got to see Ke Quan be the lead of an action comedy, and I would like for him to get more of these types of projects offered to him, among, of course, a broader variety of offerings. There is a recurring discourse among cinephiles on social media or other film-oriented spaces about how many of us feel as though not enough filmmakers are being given the space to get their beginnings and work their way up. But with Love Hurts director Jonathan Eusebio, you can look through his IMDb page and observe how he has done jobs such as fight choreography, stunt coordinator, fight coordinator, or second unit director on films that have been either directed or produced by the directors who built up 87 North Productions into the company we know it as today. John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, Deadpool 2, Violent Night, The Fall Guy, and to me this indicates that either Chad Stahelski and David Leitch specifically, or more broadly speaking, the culture of 87 North Productions is either intentionally or incidentally fostering a sense of mentorship for other people in the world of stunts to follow that evolutionary path of transitioning into becoming action directors. And there is no doubt that Hollywood action tends to look better when it allows the people who are more knowledgeable about the mechanics and technology involved with creating action on screen to do great work that is not interfered with by corporate overlords. That's one of a million reasons why I have no interest in a lot of the larger franchises that are released nowadays. James Cameron's Avatar is one of the only exceptions to that because he remains in charge of all of that, and those stories are informed by his environmentalism, as well as his considerable expertise at filmmaking. If 87 North Productions can expand itself to be a place where a whole new generation of stunts to directing people are mentored, this could be very promising for anyone that would like to see the overall quality of action in Hollywood productions elevate above where it currently is. So yes, with that in mind, I am more willing to give Love Hurts a bit more grace in its shortcomings. Filmmaking is like many other creative pursuits where the more you do it, the more you are able to learn and develop. So if we shift focus now to the film's narrative, one of the most glaring flaws of the film is the so-called romance between Ke Quan's character Marvin and Ariana DeBose's character Rose. And make no mistake, it pains me to say that. It happens far too often where people will review films and say X character and X character don't have romantic chemistry, and I will say, what are you talking about? Yes, they do, and you're not even a romance girly. You as a commentator or pundit of movies have never expressed an appreciation for the art of romantic storytelling, so I have no interest in hearing your unsolicited opinions about romance in films. But in the case of Marvin and Rose, I want to point out that this could have worked better than it did. We're going to circle back to this talking point in the spoiler section when I don't have to talk in circles. But for now, to keep things vague, there is another coupling in this ensemble of two characters that have a romantic storyline, and it made more sense and ultimately came across as more believable than Marvin and Rose did. And one of the reasons why that was the case is because with that other couple, they were both presented as individual characters first that feel like outsiders. So when they get paired up, it makes sense that they would be able to experience a certain amount of compatibility that plays out on screen. But not only that, they were given the space to just look at each other and feel the feelings that those characters have burning inside of them. But with Marvin and Rose, so often when they're talking to each other, the focus is on external threats in the story. It's the threat that facilitates a lot of the action and danger, and more often than not, their story feels like it's prioritizing this sense of needing to fight back and dealing with this source of danger, instead of giving them room to just sit with each other and unpack the emotional baggage of what is supposed to be a once forbidden love that they share. It seems like Ke Quan and Ariana DeBose get along very well, so I have to believe that they could have performed this in a way that was more compelling than it ended up being, but it just wasn't coming across anywhere near as romantic as I was hoping to see. But now let's talk more about things with plot spoilers in detail. Marvin used to be a killer and in many ways the muscle sent by his brother to handle rough jobs. His brother Knuckles is the boss of this particular criminal organization, and one of the biggest reliefs about this story for me was that there was no propaganda propaganda. A lot of Hollywood action films are propaganda, and I don't enjoy watching that. With this, though, it was mostly focusing on one criminal group that Marvin used to be in. He was only able to leave under the condition that he do a hit on Rose, whom Knuckles believed had stolen some money from him. In actuality, the robbery was done by a group of people who are in Knuckles' group. One of them being Cam Gigande's character, Rennie, who, surprisingly, he didn't have much to do in the way of action. I would have thought he would have been part of one of these big fight sequences, but that did not end up being the case. He's just a villain. So the scheme involved those two, as well as Rhys Darby's character, Kippy, who is the accountant of this organization, but she was the one who got all the blame. To the surprise of absolutely no one, Rhys Darby delivered exactly what you would expect him to deliver if you've seen Rhys Darby in any movie, with the very quintessentially silly Rhys Darby energy. That's what he does in this. So Marvin took Rose out to where he was supposed to do the job and bury her afterwards, but instead, he cut off the zip tie restraining her wrists, told her to run away and not come back. He saved her life and kept that secret from his brother. After that, he began this new life as a real estate agent, and his boss and mentor is a man named Cliff, played by Sean Astin. There's definitely that nostalgic appeal to some, as both Sean and Ke were in the Goonies together, but I myself did not grow up watching the Goonies. I grew up watching Lord of the Rings, so watching Sean Astin show up in a movie for all of 5 minutes and acting the hell out of those 5 minutes and being highly emotionally impactful, all I could think was, yes, that's why he's Samwise Gamgee. Cliff gives Marvin an award for success or excellence, something like that, in this occupation of being a real estate agent, and Marvin becomes highly emotional about this. He's practically emotionally overcome to have received this award. And throughout the film, we see him clinging desperately onto that award because it's symbolic of how far he's come to move past that old chapter of his life. He's trying to atone for the wrongs of his past. If Ke Quan's assignment is to convey that type of emotion, he is more than capable of doing so. He won awards for Everything Everywhere All at Once precisely because of his range, and in this film he is still showing that range. The emotional intensity of guilt at his past, fear that his new life will be taken away, it's all very compelling in the heat of the moment because Ke Quan makes it compelling with his acting. But narratively, when you look at the story and the arc as a whole, you can't help but see that it's disjointed. When Rose comes back into Marvin's life, she's pushing him to get back into this fight because she's saying that hiding isn't living. And that may very well be a decent way of trying to infuse a deeper emotional meaning into what would otherwise be a pretty standard action genre premise. You used to be in the game, you got out, and now you're being pulled back in. I appreciate that they're trying to give this emotional dimension to the protagonist and the story overall. I've said it on my channel before, more than once, that I have a real issue with these Hollywood action films because a lot of them are not only propaganda, a lot of them also focus on a male protagonist who is overly prone to stoicism, and as a result, there's nothing for me to emotionally connect with in the story. Even in the negative comments for this film, you will often find people saying that regardless of their issues with Love Hurts, they really like Ke Quan, that he did well with what he was given, and they still want to see him in more films where he gets to be the leading man. But the narrative comes across as confused because he also genuinely seemed to love this new life. I don't think it was only motivated by atonement. I think he genuinely loved being a real estate agent, having the co-workers and boss slash mentor that he did, and he liked being able to set people up in homes in which they would also get to start a new life. But in the end, it's almost like all of that gets thrown away because the bad guys get defeated and he's now able to be with the woman that he loves. But if you wanted this new life to only be some sort of hollow veneer, something that he's hiding behind and something he doesn't genuinely love, if we weren't supposed to root for him to keep this life, you probably should have directed Ke Quan to act differently. The way he was acting made me very emotionally invested in him being able to get back to this life and also have the woman he loves because I love a good love story. To elaborate more on the other example I was talking in circles around in the minimal spoiler section, I was talking about how there's another couple in the film that had a more effective delivery of romantic storytelling. The first thing that happens to let Marvin know that his new life is about to be flipped upside down is he's confronted in his office at work by a knife-wielding assassin named Raven, who writes poetry. They don't only fight one another, they establish Raven as being a sort of eccentric character, because how many times does the assassin character in an action film who's coming after the action hero stop the fight to read some of his poetry? He wants some creative feedback. That's nice. That's different. That's unusual. And then we have Ashley, who is Marvin's assistant. So Ashley hates her job. She's very cynical, a bit snarky. She's very put off by the abundance of Valentine's Day decorations and sentiments. She's dreading the thought of anyone from work trying to ask her out. She discovers Raven after hours in Marvin's office. He's still in there after having been knocked out by Marvin during their fight. She also discovers Raven's book of poems, and she just loves them. And they have this weirdly sweet connection once he wakes up because they establish the way that both of these people feel like outsiders, that they're misunderstood, which conceptually is a decent start for a romance, but also Lio Tipton and Mustafa Shakir are able to build on that in a convincing way where they do feel like a real couple. And that's odd because they just met, whereas Marvin and Rose are supposed to have this long history with one another, but the film never gives that part of their relationship the necessary room to breathe in the midst of everything else going on, of trying to figure out what happened with this stolen money, what the right plan is to deal with Knuckles. It's a lot. And then I suppose it would be the C plot, but we have these two henchmen, King and Otis, who are also going after Marvin and Rose. But King keeps giving Otis advice on how he can best attempt to successfully reconcile with his wife. That also felt more convincing of a relationship than Marvin and Rose. The comedic side plot of the C plot was more believable than the romance of your lead couple. Really? Listen, if you don't know how to do romantic storytelling, either don't put that in your movie, or maybe watch some really great romances in film and study them. You need to linger in a romantic space. You can achieve that through longing looks, a lingering hand touch. Just give us something. And it's very peculiar to be so aggressively heavy-handed in your incorporation of Valentine's Day aesthetics, but completely misunderstand how to deliver a believable romance for your lead couple. Marvin's wearing a jumper with hearts all over it. There's heart-shaped post-it notes, a heart-shaped decorative wood carving in one of Marvin's houses. They constantly say the word Valentine. Marvin baked heart-shaped cookies, and also he fought those henchmen using the heart-shaped cookie cutters. You couldn't have made it more abundantly clear what time of year this film is supposed to be set during. And I also felt a bit robbed when it came to the confrontation between Marvin and his brother, because there was so much buildup in the plot to this reunion. And before seeing the film, I was looking forward to seeing Ke Quan and Daniel Wu face off because they're both trained to do that. They can actually do this action and fight choreography themselves. But there's also a lot of family baggage between them that they talk about a bit in between throwing punches and kicks, but I can't help but feel shortchanged considering how short the film's runtime ended up being. We couldn't have added, 20 minutes to this film so we could get some more flashbacks to further develop that relationship, as well as expand the amount of time that they have during this reunion before the story comes to its natural conclusion. So all in all, the film is a mixed bag. Ke Quan is definitely the film's high point. Marshawn Lynch was also a welcome, funny addition, although I wish they had given him a bit more because he was very funny in Emma Seligman's film Bottoms. And on the other end of the emotional spectrum, Sean Astin was a really heartwarming addition because he evoked so many feelings within the heart of the story in only a few minutes of screen time. Ashley and Raven were a decent B-plot. They got quite a few laughs from the audience at my screening. And from what I've observed in the early responses online, for some people, the film's disjointed elements are too many to forgive. And for others, the film's good parts and charming qualities are enough to tip the scale in a more positive direction when it comes to scoring the film. If you're watching my review up to this point without having seen it, I wouldn't be able to tell you which of those camps you're going to fall into, but if you do decide to see it, you will be supporting the agenda of trying to get Ke Quan more leading man roles, which I would say is a net positive, so make of that what you will.
Going into this, I wanted to be able to do all the fights myself. And I trained with our guys for a long time trying to get myself in shape in preparation for this because I knew that we were doing something special.